Today we have a really interesting guest. So we have a Greek adult entertainer and MSMR artist, NECRO NICKI. Welcome, NICKI, here. It's honor to have you, and I am glad that we have honor of interviewing you tonight. So tonight we're gonna talk about the black magic, Slavic sorcery, Slavic deities, and many other things. So can you tell us, NECRO NICKI, just for the sake of this interview, how you started working with Slavic deities?
Oh, Slavic deities in particular. I like that. Well, my heritage and bloodline is half Russian. My mom is full Russian. So I'm very connected with that side. And it even my grandpa and grandma, okay. So my I don't even think I told you about this, even though we've had like conversations about like being like my heritage and whatever. But as far as my mom's side, my great grandparents moved from Russia to the United States to escape the religious persecution because they were Russian Orthodox. But they actually moved, well, actually they technically moved to my great grandparents moved to Mexico, and my grandparents were in the United States. So I'm very connected with like the Russian culture. And then on my dad's side, a major part of my heritage is actually Serbian, which is both very Slavic. I have different other ethnicities mixed into me, like English, American Indian, and whatnot, but those are the two main dominant. So for a while, I've really been wanting to get more intense with the Slavic pantheon. I remember we've talked about that before. And then Morena, of course. I mean, like, my name I go by is Necro, which means death. And Morena or Morana, depending on where you're from, what you want to call her, it literally means death. And it's crazy because, like, I've worked with quite a few different death goddesses, and what I've noticed is I've worked with a lot of different deities, as you have also, but what I've noticed is that with the death goddesses, I think it's just because I'm more connected with, like, the death current, stuff happens a lot faster. Even if it's, like, healing or, like, whatever, it's just, it's very quick and intense. It's kind of like those homies that you have are just like, yeah, you want this, boom. I don't even have to really even ask for stuff. They give me what I want. But working with Morena, like, recently and to be honest, I've been only working with her for like a couple weeks. But I'm like, she's like my matron goddess. Like, I'm all about it. And I've watched all your videos on YouTube about her. So yeah, like, well, a lot of what I want to share is that actually that has to do with an experience I had yesterday at a cemetery. So yeah, with her, because I evoked her. I wasn't like possessed by her, but a lot of crazy stuff happened at the cemetery last night or yesterday.
Okay, Danny, you are also having like lots of crazy shit on cemeteries. Can you make some comments on that?
Yeah, so okay. Yeah.
Well,
So
actually, no. I
went
just wanted to. I wanted Dimitri to have a chance to respond. Actually. So, Dimitri, do you have anything to say in regards to the Slavic death deities, or just death deities and the cemetery?
Like what I really wanted is for you, Danny, to talk about cemeteries, but because you insist that I talk about my stuff.
Dimitri, go ahead.
Okay, so technically, the Slavic death current is really different than the Western one, because I tend to divide death currents in the world on two types. One type is edgelord necromancy, which is pretty much a literally creation of the modern Western chaos magic. And it sees the dead people at some edgelordy, terrible stuff, right? But Slavs, in particular, like Slavic folk magic, has an approach to death which is pretty much based in folk religion. And in that approach, dead are just like dead people. You have good dead people, you have you have bad dead people, and Morana pretty much embodies the process of dying. Now,
Oh yeah.
the process of dying specifically has 3 stages. The first stage is stage of terror. You summon her and you are terrified. Shit is hitting the fan, you are having adrenaline rush, everything is going to die, you are afraid for your life. That's stage number 1. Stage number 2 is you are essentially having a physical symptoms of dying. And then stage number 3 is you have a form of near-death experience. Your psychic senses go up, and then you accept the reality and the peace of death. And you are at peace with the fact that you are going to die, and you are actually happy about it. So those are essentially 3 stages of death. Now, Morana embodies all 3 stages. Now, what is specific about Morana is that there is something she calls the doctrine of death. Now, it's a spirit I worked for years, but unfortunately I never had the opportunity to discuss this. So this is essentially the doctrine of death. According to Morana, it is impossible for the witch to practice magic unless you died in some way. It is the experience of death which makes you capable of practicing witchcraft. And she will force you to die in a literal sense. There will be some form of near-death experience which will make you capable of working with her in her current. And I tried to teach it to multiple witches of both genders. And out of all of those candidates, there was like 15 people before I gave up, right? Out of all of those candidates, including some of the famous YouTube personalities, which I am not going to name, who failed in this miserably.
We'll talk about that later.
And there was only one person who pretty much managed to succeed in this. One American guy who was actually dying, literally dying from some shit, when he reached out to me, and then we worked with Morana together, and he healed himself from illness. And you can find the testimony on my channel. He never chose to kind of promote himself, but
yeah, it's crazy how like death goddesses are so healing. Cause like I have a black cat. Unfortunately, when I adopted her, she had a lot of diseases and things I had to deal with, even at a young age. Like I had to spend like $3,000 on removing her teeth because she had some disease called stomatitis I never heard of, and a respiratory illness, and blah 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 blah. But even working just with Santa Muerte, like I'm in my bedroom right now and I have like Santa Muerte right here. Even moving the idol in my bedroom in the area we spend the most time with, like I've noticed such drastic difference where she doesn't have like inflammation in her mouth, like painful mouth movements are gone. Because I've watched a lot of your videos on Morana, and I think you've mentioned like, you know, like she's not just like a winter witch or a snow witch. She has so much more, and a lot of people need to understand like death goddesses are more just about death. Essentially, death goddesses rule life, because if someone causes death, they're actually ruling whether you're living or not. Do you know what I mean?
yeah. So, especially with Morana, so there is one specific phenomena with Morana, which people are usually mostly familiar when she's mentioned. And that's a phenomena of getting in your sleep, a soul traveling and then doing all kinds of shit. But it's not like a soul travel you see like in Western literature. It's not something you can control. She literally programs your astral body, and when you go to sleep, it just goes away and does all kinds of shit. And that's something people are really afraid of, because she kind of programs you to seek out shitty people and devour them. And then those
Oh
shitty
yeah.
people,
Oh yeah.
those shitty
Since I've
people
been
can
working with her in the last week, she had me unsubscribe from all my ex's YouTube channel. She's like, you don't need to watch the shit show. Do you know what I mean? Because if you're watching that, then like you're like connecting your cord to that. So unsubscribe from that. And I already feel more abundant and like free from that.
Yeah, as you're talking, a lot of things are swirling in my head right now. Like, I'm thinking about some of the Slavic spirits I've encountered. Actually, they come and talk to me a lot. They actually will talk to me in like Bulgarian, and I'm not Bulgarian and I don't speak any Bulgarian,
That's
but
so cool.
yeah, and so like for instance, like there's a really necromantic water fae from Dimitri's homeland, and they've come and interacted with me, and I've worked with them a little bit.
Is it the Rosoka?
Yeah, it's a variation of that. Yeah, variation of
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Because I know there's like the Rosolka and then there's like the Rosolkans, but yeah, I vibe with her. She's cool. She's like about like revenge and like guys who've like done her dirty. I'm like, yeah, okay, I can screw with that.
Yeah, the or not, or the Serbian water fae are like, they look like the drowned pirates from Pirates of the Caribbean, and like literally like completely like 3D like that. And they just really are into drowning things. Like they just love to talk about drowning things. Like it's like their favorite pastime.
That's what, yeah. I mean, it's crazy though, because it's like the more I learn about Morena in particular, it's like I've recently, and I know Demetrius, we've kind of like briefly talked about like Slavic like I've known you for years, and we've kind of like briefly talked about Slavic deities, and it was like, yeah, we'll talk about that later kind of thing. But I feel like you were kind of saying that even channeling what the deities were saying, because I wasn't even ready, but now I'm like ready to like really get in touch with my heritage. So I want to like it kind of talk about like the experience I had at the at a cemetery yesterday, because it was pretty intense. It's at like one of my local cemeteries I've literally been to like hundreds of times. So I show up there and I look. I'm not. I'm not one of those like delusional practitioners who are like, walk in the cemetery and then leave a different way because the spirit won't find you. You really think the spirits are that dumb? Like if they want to follow you home, they're going to follow you home whether you go through a different gate or not, you know? And I'm not even one of those where I don't always leave like an offering at the gate, but oftentimes I will. And the last time I went to the cemetery, I left a particular offering. It was keys. It was actually keys that I found. So I went to the main gate that I usually walk to at this particular spot. And this like cemetery is like badass, because like a lot of the graves are from like the early 1900s, even some from the 1800s. So I go to the key and then I say, Morena. And I see Morena because apparently, like, Russians say Morena. And I said, Morena, what message do you have for me? And then, like, I hear this crazy, like, black metal style voice. It was like, vampirism. And then, like, I see a dead rabbit. I'm about to, like, make another step and, like, step onto this rabbit. But it's like a freshly dead rabbit. I had nothing to do with it. I don't know how long this rabbit was dead, but there were no bugs or anything on it. I didn't see anything decaying. It was just like rabbit. But it was mind-blowing just because it's springtime now. And I did a lot of channelings, and apparently, like, you know, she's known as the goddess of winter. But it was basically a sign of, I'm into vampirism, and I'm not just about winter. I'm in control of spring too. Because if you think about it, death isn't just in charge of death. Death controls life too. Because death can take life away. Do you know what I mean? It was just so cute. I went to this rabbit probably 3 times. I'm like that crazy witch who will spend like 3 hours at the cemetery where cars are almost like parked around it. Like, what is she doing? Should we call someone? You know what I mean? So This rabbit was just so cute though. Like I went by like 3 times. It was just like laying there with his eyes like partly open. I'm like thinking like, I'm like, are you okay? Are you partly alive? But yeah, she's very much about like vampirizing life that I think will safely say naturally dies, but it's like vampirizing that life force. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm. Yeah. Do you think that I really wanted to ask you about this because you're one of the only people I've heard really talk about this very much, which is the spiders, the astral spiders.
Oh
Do you think that
yeah.
those are connected to death and vampirism as well?
Yeah, they're yeah, I have an altar over here.
Uh-huh.
It's funny though, 'cause like I have like we're connected to Ethernet so we can get a good stream, but I have my router and then I have like this table that's like on my router and it has like an altar to Arachne, who I
Mhm.
connect to obviously the spider spirits, and then Arimon, and they're both to me connected to like the web of the internet. And
Uh-huh.
so I like, yeah, I'm very like spiders are my main spirit animal, but if I see a spider in my room, I do freak out and I feel bad. I'm like, I'm sorry. I gotta do what I gotta do because I'm not gonna sleep with that thing crawling on my face. But yeah, I've actually seen like astral spiders appear, and I've actually transcended the zodiac through Arachne. Arimon has been someone who's just been like, yeah, if you wanna, he's been like Arimon. If you think about it, it almost kind of sounds like algorithm. So if you wanna like understand the algorithm, I would recommend working with him because he's just like post all the time, do this. It's like basically worshiping Arimon is worshiping the algorithm. But yeah, I have a very strong connection with spiders. I mean,
Mhm.
there was a
So,
book I was reading on Arimon, a lot of spiders would appear. And yeah, I can go on for days about that.
so what you said about the internet, yeah, like when I first encountered, I guess what you could, a lot of these demonic emperors or whatever kind of refer to themselves as the devil intermittently, but they've always identified with the internet really strongly. Um, I don't know exactly what's up with that, but they really that's kind of they feel like that's their own claim to fame. Um, and then with the spiders, like so what's unique is that they're just every time I see them with the naked eye, even though they're like astral, they're just like so dense and so solid. Um, and they're one of the most visible spirits that there are. In fact, I don't see them in my third eye at all. I only see them with my naked eye. And I had an encounter with them. I've only encountered them like I don't know, like a few times, but when I have, it's been kind of profound. I I encountered them after a really deep dive with like Abaddon and Persephone and Lilith.
Nice.
And I saw them again. They came and it was so creepy. Like I would even hear like a spirit singing like the Itsy Bitsy Spider song.
I love that.
And like I was like, what the fuck, you guys? And he said the trippiest shit to me. They're like, how are the joys of our counseling? We find you very entertaining. And I was like, what the fuck? And like, and then right after that, like my dog she was like 14, but she got sick and died. And then all this dark stuff. And then I was staying out by this old Native American cemetery for a few weeks. And it was just like death. This year has been extreme for me. Like,
I'm sorry, honey.
it's
Yeah.
been, yeah, it's been extreme, like darkness and death and like elimination and all of that shit. It's been really intense.
Yeah, that definitely sounds like Morena energy. And like I feel like spiders aren't all bad. It can be good. Like how I explained, like you can like weave the webs. Like one of my recent exes like came here, and I live in the Midwest. I live in Indiana. And after he had left, I noticed I like saw an actual spider and it looked weird. It was like really weavy, like it looked like a slinky kind of energy kind of thing, and I saw like the webs, but to be honest, in my area, I haven't really seen a lot of things physically with my eyes, but that was something I saw, and like it was almost like the spider was like weaving a web of destiny. But yeah, spider magic is definitely very. Have you worked with the Kikimora or the Leshy, Demetrius? I don't think I've seen videos on your channel about that.
So essentially, I never publish a lot about Slavic magic for mostly political reasons, because it's kind of thing which can be used as against the people I am from, and the certain countries are not necessarily friendly towards Slavic peoples, and they
Oh,
actually.
really? Like, where are you from now, though? Do you live in Serbia or?
So I don't want to. I am in France currently, but I am leaving France soon. But anyway, you mentioned Leshy, right? So the
Yeah.
Leshy are essentially forest spirits. So the king of the Leshy is known as Veles or Veles, the old Slavic god of the forests. And so they are essentially elementals on steroids. Uh, while using him in magic and his spirits, I got the only one instance of real physical 3D possession on the person I was affecting. So I am talking about type of possession where the person gets overtaken, their consciousness gets uh, kind of morphed, and it was witnessed by multiple people. So essentially, the spell was designed to force certain individual to do a certain thing properly, and he refused, and then the spirit violently possessed him and tormented him, and it was witnessed by multiple people. And this was the most powerful spell I have ever done for any reason whatsoever. So yeah, Leshies are extremely powerful.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I agree that this is a really dangerous and powerful form of witchcraft. So the only thing I would say is that those spirits are maybe related to nature, but they are not at all safe. So you
Oh,
should be.
yeah. I feel like, wow. Yeah. Even you just saying what you just said, like, tree magic is some of the most powerful magic I know, because it's like here in this dimension, but it's like rooted in the underworld, you know? So that's why I like touching trees a lot, and I have certain trees that are like a lush tree, an abundance tree, and a protection tree, and even at the cemetery recently I like saw the perfect like fay tree, and it's like to me like tree magic like as far as the results I've gotten are is some of the most powerful magic.
Yeah. Do you feel like the rhythms coming from the earth ever like it's like a beat, almost like a drum beat? It comes from trees too sometimes. It's like a heartbeat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
honestly I haven't felt that, but I always wanted to. Like I got like a shamanic drum, like one of those like Moroccan drums, you know. And I always want to do that because they say like, hey, if you want to drum into the underworld, like, do that. And usually they'll say like trip on whatever you need to trip on, and then like have someone like drumming away. I've
Yeah.
never done that, but that completely makes sense how that would work.
You said something interesting. It was just you kind of said it in passing, like as part of a story you were telling, but about how white people think the dead are stupid. And I think that's what you actually hit on was actually kind of a really common misconception, actually. The like necromancy and working with the dead and the dead themselves, I feel, are actually so much more. There's so much more of different types of dead, and like there's and working with the dead is really powerful and really helpful as a magician.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I'm curious, like, if you could describe kind of like the range of like of dead spirits that you've encountered or worked with, like.
Yeah, there's been a lot. I would say the main ones have been Santa Muerte. I would say Kali. And these are deities that I have like statues and altars of. And then I would actually say the Fae also, which actually surprised me. Because a lot of like spiritual revelations that I've come across haven't been, oh, I watched a YouTube video and someone said this and that's what I experienced. It's more of like, I experienced that and then I researched it and I'm like, whoa, they had like a similar experience. Because I had a lot of experiences with the Fae before I realized that the Fae actually commonly turn up at the cemetery.
Yeah.
And what was crazy is, okay, so so there's been a lot of things that like Morena has shown me recently at the cemetery. She's shown me, it was like she gave me a lot of gifts and told me a lot of things, whether physical or spiritual. But she basically was like talking about the angel of death, but more of like, if you think about it, angel means messenger. So a lot of her messages have to do with death. And she showed me like a decapitated angel. And it was pretty crazy. Like a decapitated angel statue that I never saw. It was basically like some of her most profound messages have to do with death, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like I don't know, there's these guardians of cemeteries that I've encountered that to me I consider Fae. You know, they're not exactly just your ordinary dead person. You know, they're much more ancient and much more powerful than that.
Yeah, what was interesting though, when I was like, Morena, give me a message, and she presented a dead fucking rabbit who looked freshly dead or whatever. But what's interesting is at that same cemetery, I've had Asmodeus show himself as a rabbit. I've actually had him present himself demonically as a demonic rabbit. So she seems very I guess a nice way to say this, just very dominant over men, like that type of energy. She was like, oh, you were working with this spirit here? Yeah, let me show you what's up. Oh, these mofos think that I'm just about winter. It's spring now. Show you that I'm about spring. And I can bring spring the F down, even though one of the most prominent symbols of spring is the rabbit. I was just like, whoa. Like, it was crazy. I've been to this particular cemetery like hundreds of times. I'm one of those crazy girls. Let me show you one thing she brought to me as a gift at the cemetery.
Yeah.
She brought me this geode. Like, do you see how sparkly that is? Yeah.
How did she bring it to you?
It just appeared. I never seen it before. And what's crazy is, like, to me, geodes mean like the underworlds. And honestly, she brought me like 10 other gifts that are just like equally as bad as this. But I'm not like, hey, this is show and tell. But like, to me, like, Morena means the underworld, and that's like the inner earth of like the geode, you know? So that was so cool. And I was talking to Anna Menora, who's one of my good friends, and we were talking about geodes like a few days before. Like how I was gonna travel to this one area to find some more, and I was like, no, here, you don't have to travel. Here they are.
Yeah. That's dope. Crazy. Yeah, that's really dope. So like I've encountered so many strange like dead spirits, like for instance, like I have a lot of Roman emperors that have like showed up.
That's cool.
And I haven't started working with them yet. But I want to, like Marcus I don't even know how to pronounce his name. Marcus Aurelius and Diocletian. I've also like met a few dead like famous people too, which is like really trippy.
Yeah, okay, me too. So we'll share stories. This was supposed to be
Yeah.
girls' date chat, but it's okay.
Yeah.
Demetrius can watch too.
Yeah.
Who are
That's
the
cool.
celebrities you met with?
Oh my goodness sakes! Like, did I say oh my goodness sakes? So this is crazy. So like, okay, so everyone's gonna think I'm so emo and so retarded for saying this, but like,
Oh no, I'm way more emo and retarded than you ever imagined. So go ahead.
So I actually encountered Kurt Cobain and talked to him.
Nice. F yeah.
Yeah.
I met his supposed killer, so we'll keep going on.
Okay, cool.
Who was really aggressive towards me, so we'll keep going on.
Oh, we'll get into that. So yeah, so as just a backstory, like when he died, I was like 12, and I actually, because I live in Seattle, I actually went to his house like the day after.
Oh, okay, yeah. I'm very familiar with the story, so I understand, yes.
Yeah, I went to his house after his body was found, and this was, before he became posthumously, like, canonized, right? So there wasn't actually a lot of people there. There was just like a few reporters and police officers and stuff. And I was just this little girl hanging out there, but like some reporter saw me and was like, Courtney Love's across the street if you want to go see. And I was like, okay. So I like walked across the street.
I mean, if you're a Kurt Cobain fan, that's pretty ballsy to want to see her, you know?
Well, it was kind of a historical event,
Yeah, no, I know. But it's
So
like, a lot of fans don't like her for obvious reasons.
Not like to meet her, but just to watch, to witness it,
Yeah.
And so like I went over and like saw her, and she was screaming and sobbing hysterically, and she had the baby with her, and I was just watching that happen. But like fast forward like many years later, for a time I was working at the museum in Seattle that has like all of his clothing and guitars and like
Really? Okay, what if you don't mind disclosing what type, at least what type, if you don't want to say the name museum, like what type or whatever.
Oh, that's no problem at all. It used to be called the EMP Museum, and it was kind of known as like the Jimi Hendrix Museum.
Nice.
Now it's called like MPOP, I think, but I'm sure the exhibit is still there because it's like the biggest draw probably. So like all of his stuff, his photos, all of his notebooks, everything is in there. And so
oh yeah.
I've been working there for a couple of years, and every single day like being there and being around all those things. And I didn't hear from him for the first year or two, but when I went through a really dark period where I was starting to feel kind of on the edge.
Yeah, you can almost feel empathic and like almost feel and correlate how they feel. So I can definitely vibe with that, but with a different person, but yeah.
Yeah, and so I kind of like, out of respect, because he had those journals that were published that he didn't ever want published. I think he even included it in a curse in it, like no one fucking read this, like blah blah blah.
Yeah.
But like, and I didn't read it, but I just finally kind of caved in, and I was like thumbing through it. And as I was thumbing through it, I heard a spirit say really emphatically, it said Lynn Hirschberg. And so I turned a few more pages, and then I saw, because like the journal's like a photocopy of his writing, and I turned it, and in big angry scrawled letters it said Lynn Hirschberg.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, okay, like And so basically what I found out was that, so when his baby was taken away, before he died, it was because of this woman, Lynn Hirschberg, was a reporter for a magazine, and she put out a story that Courtney was using heroin and they lost their baby. And so he was still really pissed off about that.
Yeah.
And
That
then
makes sense. I never heard about that, and I'm like a full-on nerd about like true rock and roll and shit. So that's dope.
And then he was telling me about something that I didn't know, because I'm not of the same generation. I was too young to have known about this, but he was talking about like the old days of punk rock and how
fuck yeah, that's what I'm about.
yeah, he was talking about how San Francisco was really cool, and that LA at the time was like just really bigoted and macho and like homophobic and stuff.
Oh yeah, it's unfortunate because like two of my main heroes, even people if I could go on a date with or just like a coffee date with, are Roz Williams and Darby Crash. And those are two very punk rock, like Darby Crash is of the Germs and basically was one of the main originators, not the founder of punk, but he was supposedly on like Wikipedia and shit, like it says like he was gay but wasn't openly. It was a time where it was hard to be open about that, and same with Roz Williams. So yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah, and like it was just weird because like I mean I actually haven't spent that much time in California. I did live in LA like a couple years ago for like 6 months, but other than that I really haven't spent much time there. But he just was talking about how much he loved San Francisco, and then he was talking about personal privacy, like that was still really something that he really felt like was violated, his personal privacy.
Oh yeah, that's what happened.
And then he did say he missed being a husband and a father.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of. I mean, it's interesting that you bring up Kurt Cobain. So I'm gonna say a lot of crazy alleged shit, and no one can believe me. It doesn't fucking matter. But I supposedly have met the alleged killer of Kurt Cobain, but this probably didn't even happen because it's just someone like getting publicity. So anyways, long story short, I used to be basically like a groupie and a dancer of this band called The Mentors, to where when I was an adult performer, an adult actress, I had a PORN party and I was like, if I could have anyone at my party to like make me like basically like indoctrinate me into like the adult community, be like the mentor. So they came, of course, and they were all stoked. And then another time, a few years later, I went to, this is a very long story short, I went to a July 4th party. And then the guy, Alan Wrench, showed up. And I was like, this guy was crazy. Like, I went to their party on 4th of July, like, party with them. Unfortunately, I was, like, sober at the time, so I didn't really party, but I was hanging out with them. Then the next day, Alan Wrench showed up, and he was, like, really aggressive. He was like, I'm Alan Wrench. Here's my CD. And I looked it up, and, like, I don't know. There's all these crazy stories with the band, but I don't know what's true because a lot of it seems to be with publicity. But like, allegedly, that guy was like claiming that like Courtney Cobain was like, and this is all alleged, like bribing him and stuff. But yeah, it's crazy because I have like a weird connection with that. But he was really aggressive because like I spent 4th of July, like they call it Sleep Bandit Mountain, which is a nice word of saying like the R word basically. So like I hung out here on 4th of July, and the next day they were like, because like I have weird connections with the occult community, but I have a lot even deeper, earlier connections with the rock and roll like punk community. So it was crazy because like he showed up, he's like, I'm Alan Wrench, here's my CD, and then I googled it later. I'm like, All right, so he was claiming to do all this. Yeah, so it's crazy. But have you watched the documentary Bleached?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I've seen all the documentaries. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? Like most people don't know, but it's like, whoa.
Yeah. Well, and then there was that documentary by oh, what's his face? Is it Nick Broomfield? I can't remember his name, but he did kind of the one that was like where he interviewed the guy from the Mentors.
Okay,
wait.
yeah, those are my homies. Like those are my those guys asked me to be on tour and I'm like, I don't think they can afford this. I love you guys, but yeah.
Yeah.
That'd
I
be
have
expensive to have me on tour for a week or a month or whatever, you know.
like, fuck it, we're just gonna talk about whatever the fuck, man. Like, so dude, like I have a crazy story, a ghost story that involves Trent Reznor too.
Oh, nice.
Should I tell it?
Yeah, go for it. I like
Okay.
ghost stories. He's still alive though, right?
Yeah, Trent Reznor's alive, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I've
So
never
like, but
been, I've been
he's
one of
part of
those,
the
like,
fucking
I'm
story.
a
Yeah.
hardcore goth, but I've always been, not to talk shade, but I've never been a Nine Inch Nails fan, but I can understand why people are. So you had a ghost story with him.
Yeah, yeah. So this is crazy. So this is like some kind of like forgotten history, but there was something that happened. So him, like Trent and like Marilyn Manson used to hang out in Seattle a lot around like the turn of the millennium. And there was this guy that they hung out with who was like a big part of the scene, and he was really good looking guy, but he was like really really bad. He was a rapist and
Oh,
a
okay.
sadist, and he had like kidnapped a girl and kept her captive and like tortured her and raped her and stuff. um Shortly after that happened, so he that wasn't quite the police hadn't caught up to him for that yet, so he was still running around. um and so he basically tried to do the same thing to my friend who was friends with him at the time.
Oh.
And she was a witch actually, and she had a really bad feeling. All of a sudden he was giving her wine which she didn't know was drugged. He was trying to drug her so he could do this to her. And like she got a phone call at his house from some coworker that was like, by the way, I just had a really bad feeling and I found out Jason like was like raped and tortured and abducted this girl. And
It's
so that,
crazy how these rapists, like, they don't have any game. Like, what? You can't, like, recite some Shakespearean poetry. Like, just improve your game, and you don't have to do that. Do you know what I mean?
I don't think that was what he was into. He was actually extremely charming and extremely handsome guy.
But
So
it was probably a fetish of his, yeah.
exactly. So she got wind of that and she basically threw something at him. She's a really powerful witch. She threw something at him energetically. And like I felt like a picture fell off of the wall and she just like ran the fuck out of there and she escaped. A few days later, she ran into him walking down the street in downtown Seattle, and both of his eyes were like completely bloodshot. You know, when people's eyes look like they're completely filled with blood. And he was like, please help me, please help me. She's like, I'm not gonna fucking help you. Like, what the fuck? And like, um, the next day, so that was like Halloween Eve. So that evening, he had friends come over and they were just like hanging out in his loft apartment. And they were like, okay, we're gonna go get some beer. We'll be right back. So they come back and he was hanging from, so it was like a 2-story loft, but there was no in between floor. So it was just like, I don't know, it was like 30 or 40 feet from the floor to the ceiling. And he was hanging from the top of the ceiling on a really short rope.
Oh my god.
And like, she like they were all his friends and her and everybody was like asking the cops like, how did he get up there? And like, we don't know. And so a few years later, I was hanging out with this friend so I have all these ties with like MK Ultra too. So I was hanging out with this friend who's who's like a metal singer
Yeah,
from back in the
I
day.
watched some previous videos. I have something to add on MK Ultra after you're done with your story.
Yeah, definitely. So I figured out he was part of MK Ultra, so we were sort of talking about that. And I had this feeling to tell him about the story. I wasn't sure why, and I just sort of told him about this guy that hung himself. And it was weird because I actually ended up working in the same apartment where he hung himself a few years later by coincidence. I worked in the same fucking apartment.
Okay.
And that's when I started to encounter his spirit. So anyway, so I'm hanging out with this guy who's an MK Ultra, and I told him that story, and he's like, oh, that's crazy. And then he's, a few minutes later, just randomly, he's like, by the way, so Trent Reznor killed my friend.
Okay.
And I was like, was his name Jason Sweetland? And he's like, how the fuck did you know that? I was like, that story I just told you was about Jason Sweetland. So,
Oh.
isn't this fucking crazy? So, basically, Trent Reznor's friends, who he was one of his friends, believed that Trent Reznor killed Jason Sweetland, but that Jason Sweetland deserved it because he was a piece of shit.
Okay. So did he get
don't-
prosecuted for it?
No, he was never even suspected of it except for people inside the circle. I was told he did pay for his funeral.
Oh, wow.
But
So
I don't
Trent
know.
paid for Jason's funeral?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So that's just a really crazy story. Like, that's like, if I ever ran into Trent Reznor, I would say just 2 words, Jason Sweetland, and his reaction would be priceless, I'm sure.
You gotta do it sometime. Yeah. So I was in the adult industry at one point. Well, no, I still am. What am I talking about? But yeah, so it's kind of a long story with my artistic career. Like, I was in a bunch of bands, and like I was a metal singer. Then I became a model, and it got boring. So then I got into adult modeling, and I worked for various, like, some of the top companies. And then, okay, what was the story I was supposed to tell you about?
We were talking about dead celebrities, and
It wasn't about Trent. It was about someone else.
there was Kurt Cobain. As far as what I was talking about.
Damn. I have ADD, so I forget about stuff.
It's okay. It's okay. But did you say that you did encounter some dead celebrities?
Oh, yeah. I have stories to tell about that. I would say some of the main celebrities that I encountered was actually Gigi Allen. Do you know who he is?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like, Gigi Allen, like, he's one of my, like, top 5 if I can bring from the dead and hang out with. And I work a lot with, like, the shadow people, and they're a lot about him too. And yeah, at one point I was really close friends with his brother, Gigi Allen.
Yeah. He just did an interview on Soft White Underbelly that I watched.
Oh, nice. Yeah. He's an interesting character. We were supposed to hang out, and he like flaked out, and I was like, what do you have to lose? Like, I'm like probably like 30 years younger than you, so why are you flaking out on me? But he was cool. I could probably see why, because there was like one of his best friend's son had a huge crush on me, to the point where his parents printed out a poster and he had it on his wall. So that might have screwed it up. Or like he realized that I was basically like a groupie for the Mentors. Or his drummer, Dino. Okay, so this was crazy. And poor Demetrius is like, what's going on? Like, I just live over here. Like, I don't understand this crazy, like, demonic punk American stuff. But
Dimitri, do you find this interesting at all?
I will just let you talk.
well, we have to give the disclaimer. Things might get a bit controversial. So you know Dino, right? From the Murder Junkies, who was the last band Gigi Allen was in before he passed away. Well, Dino, the drummer, will enlighten you, Demetrius. He's known for playing in the Clad. Okay. And I didn't know this when I went to their show. I was just like, oh my gosh, like total groupie status, like all excited. You know what I mean? And he just kind of like saw that in my eyes. So like I was at a bar and he selected me. He's like, you. And he got his drumstick and he put Vaseline on it. Does Danny know what's going to happen next?
I think so.
So he has me put Vaseline on his fucking drumstick. And he's naked at this bar. And like he has me like, I don't remember honestly. I think he just had me put the Vaseline on the drumstick and like he was putting in his ass. But I might have been helping him with it. I don't know. I just had a bunch of people after like approach me. They were like, are you okay? And I was like, oh, I'm okay. This is the best day of my life. You know what I mean? Like, I would have rather had, like, Gigi Allen bash my skull with his microphone, throw shit on my fucking face and, like, rape me on stage. But I'll be okay with Dino, like, having me put Vaseline on his drumstick. Do you know what I mean? But, like, there were like a bunch of girls jealous too, because like they weren't down for the cause, you know? And it was crazy because like Merle was actually jealous too, because like I bought a bunch of stuff for their merch table. And I was friends with him and like the manager of his band at the time. I think he still is the manager of his band. But like you could tell like he saw that. Oh my god. And then I had like pictures and video of like Dino like making out with me and like kissing me, you know, and he's like old as fuck. And I'm just like, he's like high on God knows what. Like probably ever. I'm like taking videos and pictures and I'm like laughing my ass off. You know, like I'm like, and I literally posted on Facebook, like at the time I really posted on Facebook up, I'm like, best day of my life. I was Murder Junkie's groupie. You know what I mean? Like, oh my god, that was crazy. And like that was probably like 5 years ago or so. Like you can imagine how crazy that would have been in the 80s or something, you know?
Yeah, I feel bad. Like I don't have any groupie stories. Like that's
Oh god, I have so many. I'm embarrassed I almost witnessed or said that one. But a lot of my groupie stories ended up like I've actually like dated and been like girlfriend to like a bunch of like famous musicians, you know?
Oh really?
Yeah, but I've had like crazy groupie stories where like there'd be like a guy like a security guy with like a list and then I would just be like, hey, and like flash myself and be like, hey, I'm here to see so and so. He's like, you can come in, kind of thing. And then the guy would be in his dressing room and I'm like flashing him and I'm like, hey, I'm here. And he's just like, you know what I mean? Most of the time they were like, welcome. I have like a million, like I literally have millions of groupie stories, but that was always just funny just to see like certain like black metal dudes or like death metal dudes like, how did she get in here? You know what I mean? But like, I don't know. I read this book when I was younger. I don't remember what it was called, but it was like this girl and she's like, basically it was like a groupie like manifesto. And it was like you can like she came up with all these creative ways on how she got into like guys she wanted to screw like dressing rooms.
You're not talking
like,
about Pamela DeBar, are you?
Every guy or like whatever. And I'm like, that gave me the confidence. I'm like, I'm gonna try it. 9 times out of 10 it would work to like just at least get in there.
Oh man. I think I had opportunities to be a groupie, but I think I was just like too scared. But
oh. Yeah, it's fun. Like I wouldn't do it now. No, I'm just like, yeah. I'm just not about that, but yeah.
But
What
like
like my first boyfriend early on was in a really big band, like probably one of the biggest like metalcore bands of all time. So that's what kind of like got me in on the scene and like talking like dating people. But yeah, I want to make music eventually.
So, like, can we talk about how you got led into doing ASMR? Because you have an excellent ASMR channel. I love your content. It's so good. And ASMR is a really it's a really important service. You know, that shit is so therapeutic for people and for so many different things. And it's one of the things I would say that's like helped me the most, you know, with like some
Oh
of my,
yeah.
and I've been using it. I've been using ASMR for a long time. So
Oh, nice. You've been probably using it longer than me though, but like by the time I got to ASMR, not to toot my own horn, but I had like hundreds of people like make an ASMR channel, make an ASMR channel. And like when I asked someone to explain this to me, like what is this? And I understand people who like when I try and promote my channel, they're just like on like cringe alert, like no, ASMR gross. Cause it's like to me for in my personal opinion, I feel like ASMR is for everyone. There's just so many different genres. It's kind of like music. You can say music is for everyone, but some people are gonna like their like hillbilly music, and some people are gonna like their fucking like Korean pop music, and that's cool, but it's very different. You have to find your own thing. You can't just listen to one type of music and say, oh, I don't like music at all. So I feel like ASMR, in my personal opinion, is for everyone because it's just really relaxing. So I had so many people like begging me for it, and the first person who described it to me, they're like, it's just like weird sounds, like the sounds of like scissors cutting paper, and I'm like, that doesn't sound cool. So whatever. After so many people requested, I'm like, fine, I'll do it. You know what I mean? Because it's kind of one of those things where I can just like sit on my YouTube channel and talk about like delusional fucking spiritual stuff, and like maybe people are thinking maybe she should go to hospital, or I could create ASMR content where people actually are like relaxing on this stuff, you know?
yeah.
So I was like, okay, well, maybe I won't make this selfish about like content. I want to just create like a kind of diary kind of thing. I'll create things that people can actually relax to. Cause to me, to be honest, like before I go to bed, I listen to ASMR. Every night before I go to bed. It could be some World War II like camp fucking crazy stuff, bunker kind of thing going on that like rests my soul, whatever calms me, you know. So I just decided to kind of do that, and I want to kind of attract a wider mass audience. And I heard ASMR is one of the top, if not the top searches of anything ever. So a lot of people are into it and they like to react, and it was crazy. Like long story short, where I live now is in the Midwest. I used to live in Southern California. I just moved out here after like 2020, after all that crazy stuff, because I'm like, there's no point. I can't even hang out in Hollywood, and I'm just like, rent's too expensive. So I moved out here, and I was shoveling snow, and I hurt my hand. And I need to make some YouTube videos because at the time I had a goal of like making YouTube video once a week. So I put gloves on, and then there was this like weird like group of people, which is cool, came in with the glove fetish, which is why I do a lot of like glove stuff, because it's like what a lot of my audience likes. So
Yeah.
and I try and throw in occult gems like into my content, but I guess it's not at this point. I feel like since I'm getting more into like the Slavic pantheon, I mean, no offense to the other gods and demons that I work with, I feel like they would be like vital important to me to like dedicate a video on Morena or the Leshy or the Kikimora or Rasuka, like Rusalka, like so yeah. Cause like a lot of people like who came across my channel, they were like, so what's your religion? Like, they thought I had some crazy ass, like, religion. I don't have a religion. I mean, maybe we should start a necro cult, but I mean, like, I'm
Yeah.
like, one of my best friends is really adamant. He said, you should start a church. You should start a religion. I'm like, I don't want to. I don't want to work with people. Like, that just sounds really, like, I'm legally an ordained minister, but I'm like, I don't want to start a, like, church and, like, hey guys, show up here at this, church, and I'm gonna, like, preach on the stand. But, like, I'm like, one of my like mottos is don't do anything you don't want to do. It sounds kind of fun, but one thing that has honestly boggled my mind is how has someone not, like, created a cult in our, like, crazy community? Do you know what I mean? What do you think about that,
it's like
Demetrius?
micro
Like,
cult.
what
Yeah.
I watched the trial and, like, the Doomsday cult, and, like, how have we not had some, like, crazy cult, like, on the news or anything?
Oh, honey, it's not because these people wouldn't love to have their own cult. I can tell you that. But I have to use the bathroom really quick, you guys. I'm sorry. I'll be right back.
It's okay.
Dimitri, talk to her about some badass, like, occult stuff.
Have you ever tried to start a cult, Demetrius?
No, I am definitely the most anti-cult person I know. Like, I will do not one of them, because pretty much when you want to start a cult, you have to essentially lure really stupid people in order for the cult.
Yeah.
And I really don't want to deal with idiots.
Exactly. That's what I was telling my friend. Like, I don't even want to deal with that because I don't want to deal with dumbasses, like, I mean, it could sound enticing to start a cult if I was really that desperate and bored, but I have, like, better things to do. Do you know what I mean?
I know.
Like, I know you've talked about Marina and Chernobog for sure on your channel, but are there other Slavic gods that you work with that you really, like, haven't really talked about too much on your channel?
I worked with almost every deity which was kind of recorded in literature.
Nice. Okay, so what about like the Leshy or the Kiki? I think you talked about the Leshy earlier. What do you think about the Kikimora?
So Kikimora is like, if remind me, but I think it's pretty close to Baba Yaga figure. It's
Okay, I could see that. Very intense.
something similar. So I worked with that, and pretty much dark natural energy, really dark, really necromantic, but also connected to forests and death and terror.
Oh
Um,
yeah, to me she was very protective of the Leshy. Cause I went on a mission to go to a forest to connect with the Leshy, and then, like, Kikimora showed up and was like, literally, I had someone, like, a pregnant crackhead lady possessed, pushing me off my track, saying you need to leave now. And then I realized after that lady was possessed by the Kikimora. Because the Kikimora is known for not having a favor towards humans and, like, pushing people off track. And she was actually known of being created by abortions, which would happen from this crazy crackhead lady. Because, I mean, it's unfortunate. Not to get political, but I'm definitely not pro abortion. I'm more on the very extreme conservative side, but this lady was like a crackhead fucking pregnant woman, so it almost seemed like the Kikimora was, like, possessing her and, like, distracting me from the Leshy,
Wow.
It looks like, okay, so it looks like what you are describing is known locally where I am from as Drakovac. It's pretty much known as the Screamer. like when you translate rectavats into English, it's like a screamer or that which screams. It's pretty much souls of really young babies who died or miscarried children who died, and they are kind of really violent and possessive. Uh, I don't want to go into details, but I have a really deep experience with those entities, and they are not easy to work with.
Oh
They
yeah.
they are protective, but they are also really violent and animalistic.
Oh yeah, for sure. I got the vibe where I was like, I gotta get out of here because like the person who seemed like possessed by Kikimora, I was like, I gotta get out of here because either she's gonna hurt me or my car, which I parked by at like a public park, and I was like, I gotta leave. But I ended up like calling the cops. Not to be a snitch, but I was like, I want to go hiking at this area. What the hell? And then she saw me coming from the distance. She's like, I thought I told you to leave. And I was like, I'm just going on the trail. You know what I mean? Like, dude, what's the deal? And
how big was she? Like, do you think you could have taken her? Like, if, oh my God, dude.
Yeah, I don't play by the rules, so it's yeah. We'll just say that. That's a nice
I
way.
want to see before.
I wasn't trying to get into any, any beef, but yeah, I don't play by the rules, so I don't recommend anyone to start anything. Well, ask any of my ex-boyfriends, right, Demetrius? Would anyone want to start anything with me?
I don't know. I actually have a quite like disliking to multiple of them, so I don't know.
I'd love to ask you about that more, sometime. But before I forget, so about that whole Jason Sweetland ghost guy, because I forgot, I got fucking distracted, but I found out that he had been attached to me until like 2 years ago, and I didn't know it until I started working with Belial. And then Belial forced him to make himself known to me.
Okay.
And that was a trip. So this sadist rapist ghost guy was attached to me, and I didn't even know it. And I don't even know how that may have affected me. I don't even know.
For sure. And the shadow people are kind of about that. They're kind of about that like chaotic fear energy. And that kind of correlates to Morena because apparently she's really into shadow energy and fear energy, which is what I'm about too. I mean, I'm about like fear and shadow energy. I mean, it's more of like if it needs to be, it's more of a protective kind of thing, So I would say if someone is being like abusive towards me, then they should fear me, sort of thing. But yeah, it's really interesting.
Yeah, it is. It's weird how these webs are woven. Speaking of the webs, so with the spiders and the universe and everything like that, like I heard you telling a story in one of your interviews about how you saw Arachne kind of weaving like the universe kind of thing.
Oh yeah, for sure. So one time I was just doing a meditation and just said her name. I was like, Arachne, 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 like in more of a meditative voice.
Mm-hmm.
And I had my eyes closed and it was just like all darkness. And it was just like the web of the stars. And then she came out to me like as a star form, as a spider, and then like went away like in a black hole, like kind of. So one of my pet peeves with people who say, oh, I'm this sign or this sign, you're not one sign. When you're born at a time, and there's certain planets and certain constellations, and yes, your birth chart can give you information, but you're not just one sign. Like for me, I was told for so long I was a Leo. And that's of Western astrology. But then if I look at my sidereal astrology, my sun signs in Cancer and like my moon's in Taurus, like it's very different. But what's interesting is like with sidereal astrology, it actually goes by the legit and accurate constellations and planets of where they are in the universe. Like, I almost feel as though Western astrology is to throw people off because astrology is so powerful. But that just relates to Arachne and her web, because her web is of the stars and of astrology. So it's one of those things where they say like, as above, so below. Like it's like things like really relate to it, but a lot of people just have like misconceptions, in my opinion, of astrology. Like they take things too seriously and they look at the smaller picture as opposed to the bigger picture, which is the web. And I see like Arachne, some people even call the spider goddess Sephiroth. I usually work with Arachne, but like, and then there's Ahriman, who's the black hole, where if he wants, he can just like engulf everything.
That's really beautifully put, and it makes me think of these kind of ET extraterrestrial energies that I don't know why, but are like really close to me. And one of the things that they have said to me was that we used to be aligned as stars.
Oh, for sure.
And it just kind of blew me away. They were doing like a healing on me, and that's when they said that, and it just kind of like made me like oh. But and then there's a tongue also that I speak in that's like connected to that. And some other entities will jump in like when I'm doing that tongue. The one I know for sure that has totally jumped in and sort of semi-possessed me when I'm doing that like extraterrestrial tongue is Kali.
Oh, hell yeah. I have a Kali statue. Yeah, she's very do you feel like it's a very protective energy?
Kali's Kali's always been really protective towards me. Yeah, she's always been pretty like there.
Yeah, I've used her for a lot of baneful stuff. And I've watched a lot of your videos, Demetrius, especially on Morena. And I like how you say she's very much about baneful magic, because that's what I'm about. And it's not a bad thing. I feel like that's like, they say words are spells. You can say it's baneful. You can say it's protective. You could say it's justice. If you want to put a dark, like, badass term to it, you can say more baneful. But that's what I'm about. Like, ever since I was young, I've had a baneful touch, and I feel like if you are going to curse someone or put baneful magic on someone, if there is justice needed, like the spirits will help you out and it'll be easy and there's no karmic repercussions. Do you know what I mean? But that's like a lot of what I've really vibed with Morena too, because they say that like she's very based on fear magic and nightmare magic and pretty much all the things that I'm about.
I think it's so amazing that you just are so comfortable in your own skin in these areas that most people have an aversion to. It's really quite fascinating.
Yeah. Like, I'm obsessed with death magic.
Yeah.
So when there's like a newly, this sounds creepy, when there's like a newly like dug up grave, I'm like, hell yeah, I'm just gonna like stand up over it and absorb all the energy. And it's just crazy because like Morena is known for that too. And so I'm just like, the more I learn about her, the more I get obsessed with it. But it makes sense because like when you go to the cemetery, you do have to be careful. Like I feel like most practitioners shouldn't be delusional. Oh, if you go a different way, you're not going to have a spirit follow you. It doesn't matter which way you go. If a spirit wants to follow you, they're going to follow you. And I've had multiple follow me. But when you do go to a cemetery, I feel like most people need to realize that there is a lot of vampiric spirits. And that's okay. It's not like anything crazy is going to happen, but you need to rejuvenate your energy somehow. Whether it's standing over a freshly buried grave or connecting with a tree. Like, I feel like they aren't going to do something really crazy, but with vampirism, especially with me, because I'm really big on vampirism, like, you need to replenish your energy if you're going on vampirism territory, which I feel like that's what, like, the cemetery is. But then, like, those vampiric spirits teach me a lot about vampirism and how to use it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Sorry, I'm like I'm like trying to blank right now.
It's okay. Yeah, so like so one question I wanted to ask Demetrius, because this was really interesting to me, was how apparently a lot of Slavics will do a ritual to where they have Marina as a corn doll and they throw her in the river, and it's like basically showing the death to her and to spring coming. How do you feel about that? Because I know you've mentioned in particular that Marina is more than just a winter snow spirit. And I feel like she has a lot of involvement with spring, especially with the dead rabbit she showed me. She's like, no, I'm about spring too, and I can control that and not just about winter, you know?
So I'm gonna be quick on this. So there is something which is known as official tradition, and then there is something which is known as a concealed tradition. So Morana is banished in public but invoked in secret. That's how this deity works. Morana is one of the two Slavic deities which were pretty cult since the pagan times, and there are a bunch of witches who still call her and work with her on a daily basis. She is not a resurrected deity like other deities. She never stopped being venerated, she never stopped being worshipped. The burning of Morana is not to burn Morana, it is to placate the peasants. Because in public, as a practitioner, you have to play a role of exclusively healer, and so you do the entire theatrics of burning Morana, but in reality, at your home, you work with her. It's more to placate the peasants and the community than to actually banish her, because you need her for the work. She is one of the main spirits of the craft. You cannot banish that if you want to work with that.
Yeah, so it's basically screwing up the peasants who don't know what's going on, but she's basically a year-round deity and doesn't really just have to do with winter, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I say. She's so powerful. I know in one of your videos, Demetrius, you said that, you know, a lot of people aren't in favor of the Slavic pantheon, but I don't see why, especially that correlates to my heritage, but it's kind of a favorable thing to us because she's so powerful. To me, ever since I've been really connecting with her, she's, in my opinion, the most powerful deity I've ever worked with, and I'm like, whoa, you know, like, so it's kind of been a good time since I kind of waited, but maybe it's not meant for her to be the deity that, like, everyone and their mom kind of works with, you know what I mean?
So essentially, it's not possible. Like, she is so intense that it's not possible. A lot of people from United States and other parts of the world try to do some shit and write down some shit, but like, I've read some of that material. It's not the thing. It's more like a sci-fi of those individuals.
Yeah, it's almost like they can't kind of connect with it, which I kind of understand why some people are kind of gatekeepers of some pantheons. Are like, I'm this heritage, don't work with my deity. I kind of get with that. I mean, I don't agree with it because I feel like everyone should just kind of be able to work with whatever deity they want to. But at the same time, I can see how I'm so much more connected to Slavic deities, even though I've been barely working with them, you know?
Yeah,
that's okay. Go ahead.
one of the key connections is like language. With Slavic deities, a really useful thing is that you can understand what deities are about pretty much from their names. You don't need any form of book to assist you. You just have to read the name of a deity. Everything is self-explanatory.
Yeah.
And if you have any basic grasp of the language, your work with them is pretty much guaranteed. You will call the right spirit for the right thing, and you won't have any issues with that. So, and also, what is really beneficial if you work with Slavic deities is you don't have to be a genius to figure out that all of the Slavic folk traditions are essentially pagan rituals. You just have to put right divine names in there, and you have full functioning ritual. And so those are two things which are really useful: language and ethnology. Those two things.
I know a lot of like the Slavic, especially witchcraft culture, is very verbal by mouth. But do you recommend any books or anything else?
So on Slavic magic, there are some people writing on the internet, okay? But the best possible way of working with them, in my experience, is you take old folk songs. So old folk songs, like from 17th, 18th century, right? And then you buy the books on Slavic ethnology / ethnography, and then you read those rites. And you are like, okay, so this ritual is obviously not Christian. So using witchcraft logic, who was in here, right? And you use this mindset and you pretty much have full grimoires written out in those books. Obviously, you have to be the witch to know who was where, and a little bit of channeling is helpful. But pretty much all of the newer books on Slavic magic are watered down. Like you
Yeah.
don't Slavic magic without blood sacrifice, animal sacrifice, and sacrifice.
Yes.
And also there are certain entheogens / drugs which could be used as well. And so it's a really primal path, and it's not about swastikas and cool neo-pagan music. It's really um, to the ground stuff. So a lot of the new material I read was pretty much watered down, and I am really sorry for those people.
Yeah.
And like, so the pantheon that comes to me the strongest is the Greek one, although I'm not aware of any Greek heritage in my bloodline. But I do find that they will speak to, I mean, they do use the Greek language with me, and I just have to translate it. But for some reason, like, we do have these like lineages that are just really strong, and even if we don't know our family history, or we can't trace it back, there's some reason, there's a really powerful reason for it, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Like Lilith in particular, and I have a strong connection with her. She told me when I do find my soulmate, I will know because they will be very connected to Greek magic. And I've yet to met that person, but she did tell me that, which was really interesting. But the Greeks have really inspired a lot of different pantheons, you know?
Yeah, when the Greek thing kicked off, actually, funnily enough, I was working with Kali, but Kali was showing me my past lives in Greece with my mother. And then after that is when all of the Greek entities started to show up. Obscure ones that I had no idea who the fuck they were, you know, and I had to, but yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
good. Is there anything you want to say to close the show?
Oh, me? Well, I'm just thrilled to have you here, Nikki. It was so much fun to talk to you. I would love to do it again. You're such an interesting woman.
Yeah, you're really sweet, and I love talking to you and Demetrius. So whenever y'all have more time, I would definitely be down to talk more.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We really appreciate having you. And let's close, then I'm gonna ask her a question, turn off the recording.
It was a great pleasure to have you here. This was a really interesting show.